Mr. Lang, you shared many of the same concerns that Mr. Regan raised in his testimony. In Alaska and across the West, the federal government is increasingly requiring the public and the states to take a hands-off approach to public lands. This means having the public and the states have less interaction and access to public lands. So would you agree that ultimately this hands-off approach to wildlife and public lands management could be detrimental to conservation of the very species that we all work to preserve if Washington bureaucrats kind of on the other side of the country are calling all the shots?
Thank you, Senator Barrasso. The conservation model, the state conservation model is built on a user-pay system. And the further you separate those users from the benefits that they're going to gain off those systems, the less they're going to be willing to pay, and over the long term, pay for the management and conservation of those resources. That model is the Pittman-Robertson Fund and the Dingell-Johnson Fund. So you have to provide benefits off refuges and parklands across our nation. If you don't, they're going to become areas that of not concern to people, and people aren't going to be willing to pay for the long-term protection and conservation of those areas. And hunters are some of the largest payers of conservation in our nation. So the more, you can't exclude people from the management of resources. I guess that's the bottom line I want to say. And increasingly, as I'm seeing the Fish and Wildlife Service's management model, it's viewing people as a threat, not as an integral part, and not something you need to provide benefits for. And in my state, if you're living in a rural lifestyle, far away, and you're dependent upon local resources for your food, you can't let just nature's cycles going up and down provide for that. You can't have a decade where there's no moose near your village. You have to manage for sustained moose populations. And having, for instance, that example I gave, caribou blinking out on Unimak Island, that's not good for hunters on Unimak Island, certainly not good for subsistence users, to allow them to someday, in some century from now, swim back out to that island and reestablish a caribou population.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr.